We're back at the line table for our final topic. A planned medical marijuana farm located near a residential area in the village of Corrales is causing a bit of a stir. More than 50 residents attended a village council meeting last week to voice their support or opposition to an ordinance sponsored by Councilor George Wright that would ban cultivation and processing of, quote, cannabis and cannabis-derived products, end quote, within Corrales. The ordinance is set for a full vote on August 8th, Laura, and it's interesting. There's a fear here that's so interesting to me. Some fear it would change the face of Corrales, the village, literally completely. But we're talking about a village that traditionally grows things, alfalfa. I mean, all kinds of things are grown there. What's the issue here as you read this? What's the problem, as they say?
I think it's ignorance.
Right?
On
whose end, though?
Well, on people who are making assumptions about what it means to have a farm with this product.
Right.
I think, there's just sort of assumptions that are coming into it. There was a quote about, a pungent smell and, this sort
That's
of thing.
right.
I mean,
That's
it's a plant that's growing. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, if they're cultivating a product, they're cultivating this plant. Mm-hmm. They're not burning it to create a pungent. That would be cutting yourself, your product off. You're not going to burn it. You're trying to cultivate it.
Sure.
So what's interesting to me is there seems to be a dissonance there between this desire by the city, by the village council, and it sounds like people who live in Corrales to remain agricultural,
right,
to remain rural, and that's obviously part of the character of Corrales.
Right.
You have different zoning and different, incentivizing to try to keep it rural and agricultural. But then you want to try to, limit the type of agricultural products that are being produced, and I think that's a big problem. There's just sort of a lot of assumptions that go along with that. They're also, they're not recognizing the potential for this kind of a product in terms of economic development.
Right.
And I think that's something that other states have done much better. Colorado has seen a lot of tax increase from this,
Sure,
and they're just not sort of seeing the benefits of it.
Yeah, Tom, interestingly, I can understand certainly the opposed folks, people that want the ordinance, I should say, afraid to get a tiger just off the chain, so to speak, and becoming something unmanageable. And you could see that, but on the second rate, as Laura mentions, you could be in early on something that a decade from now could have the village swimming in cash if it worked out correctly. This is one of those tough deals, when you're on the record as one of these council folks, it's a difficulty.
It is, and I think another difficulty is we're trying to apply logic with the village of Corrales. And with all due respect, I mean, this is an area that is extremely independent.
Yes.
I remember a few months ago.
That's right.
Yeah, a few months ago, this was a community that outlawed sanctuary, and that they didn't want any sanctuary, people there. This is going to be a non-sanctuary. If you are here illegally, there is no sanctuary. You will be, outed and stuff. And so I'm not surprised to see this particular argument take place. It is kind of a catch-22, but you know what? Having been in, Colorado quite a bit to, for business, getting in a rental car, I think that there should be some, zones. Now, I know we're talking about use versus agricultural use and stuff.
That's right.
But I think sometimes things get a little bit out of hand, and if Corrales wants to ban it, then they have that right.
Right.
But it's just one of these. It's a tough thing because they say we do want to be agricultural, but with limitations.
That's right. A couple folks have brought up zoning, Vic, and I think when I look at this, they're trying to do this right on Corrales Road, which I think might be part of the problem. It's right by residential homes. It's not like it's further east towards the river where you get a lot of acreage that could be away from potential smells, and people are concerned about lights and a lot of electricity use. We're talking about big, commercial cultivation type of a thing. When you read this, is it more about the politics about how to do it, or is it just to do it in the first place as you read it?
Oh, to me, the way I read it has nothing to do with let's do it over here or zoning or anything. Right. It's some people saying, we don't want, reefer madness in our city, which is really short-sighted. Because again, we're not even talking about Colorado. We're not talking about legalizing it for everybody. We're talking about people growing it for medical marijuana, which has been legal in this state for many years. And, we are constantly talking about how many of our residents are addicted to drugs, addicted to opioids. And, we've got this old school way of thinking that if it's in a prescription bottle, it's okay. And we've looked at states, there's been so much research done, and states that have medical marijuana, opioid use has dropped more than 60%. Right. We've talked on this show before about when someone is addicted to opioids, It cost us as a state $100,000 a year to get them help and pray that we get them off those drugs. Medical marijuana is solving that for so many people. So that issue needs to be dealt with. This isn't about zoning. This isn't about pungent smells. This is about an old way of thinking, and people are not looking at the science. And as Laura said, I mean, the economics. I mean, we've been talking about how poor we are forever. And here is a legal product that can be grown in an agricultural community. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the best pot's probably already coming from Corrales.
I don't think there's not a history of that in Corrales, exactly right, people growing stuff. But we're talking about a village of 8,500 people, Senator.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
There's a ripple effect. I lived in Corrales for a couple of years,
Yeah.
89, 90. That's a long, long time ago. But I'm telling you, you drop a stone on one end, the other end hears it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It
Right,
just
right.
really is one of those places.
Right.
And so for you, what's your sense of it as you read this?
Well, I mean, no doubt Corrales has a unique environment, atmosphere, that 25-mile-an-hour speed limit is just wonderful. But this is an interesting discussion because depending on who you talk to, we're talking about an illegal substance. That's where the
Fair
rubber
enough.
meets the road.
As far as the feds are concerned?
So,
that's right.
well, and even we have an attorney general's opinion in New Mexico that said that medical use is unconstitutional. So, when I was in the Senate, I voted for medical use. Back then, I think there were 150 or 175 people that qualified, and it was very limiting. Now, there are tens of thousands that qualify, and if you have anxiety or nausea or something, then that qualifies as medical use. So we've expanded.
Does it really?
We've expanded it, but
Not nausea from doing this show, just, more.
so it's
robust.
kind of interesting because what the ordinance says is that we're promoting agricultural use, but growing cannabis is not agricultural. And mind you, I cut my teeth in politics when I was 16. Getting petitions signed for NORML when I was going to college in San Francisco. So I mean, I've always been very open-minded to this, but there are some legitimate concerns about recreational use, and I think that's what they're talking about. And there are legitimate questions about whether or not medical use is constitutional in the state of New Mexico. Those are legitimate concerns. So they're erring on the side of caution, which for me, any governmental entity should do.
Okay. Interestingly, the state has left it up to individual municipalities to make these decisions. So this is fascinating to watch. I bet there's a lot of munis around the state watching this situation, Laura Sanchez-Rivera, going, let's see what these guys do. Or maybe the people that want to open this facility have not made the village a good enough deal, so to speak. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
I haven't heard anything about how much the village can stand to make from this.
Well,
it
that
all comes down to
certainly
money sometimes.
would tip the scales.
Right.
You would think. But those are all issues that should be considered. And I think that there is a big difference between, recreational and medicinal. And we've, I think, just in the last few years, seen so much new research about the benefits medicinally for things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, a lot of other ailments that where people who live in Corrales could potentially benefit medicinally from this product.
And to
as
be
well.
clear, they can still grow and under the state allowed limit. If you are qualified for medical marijuana, you grow at home, you can still do that. That wouldn't be affected by this ordinance. Let's watch this one. This could be very interesting as the weeks go by. That's all the time we have. Thanks for being here this week.